The thoughts, opinions, and general overall shade thrown on High at 9 News are those of the individual speakers and not those of High at 9 News, its audience, or its advertisers. The statements made do not constitute medical, legal, or financial advice, and for advice tailored to your specific situation, please consult with a licensed professional. Welcome to the High at 9 News Hour, where you will hear from cannabis industry experts and professionals from around the country talk about important topics while shining light on global issues and discussing cannabis as it relates to politics, regulation and reform, data and technology, science, research and medicine, family and parenting, art, celebrities and entertainment, fitness, sports, mental health and wellness, and plant-based medicines and entheogenics. Together, we are building a stronger community, fighting the stigma and creating change. With your host, Jason Beck, joined by special industry expert correspondents from around the country, and daily antics brought to you by cannabis. Coming to you live every Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific time and high noon on the East Coast. And thank you all for getting high at 9 with us. Yeah, good morning, you guys. Yes, it is Wednesday, March 18th, and today is National SBDC Day, Dale.
Okay, educate me on what that means.
All right. Hold on, let me pull it up. Give me 1 second. Let's see. SBDC Day. Small Business Development Centers Day recognizes the thousands of small business developments across the country supporting entrepreneurs in the pursuit of small business ownership. Oh, I'm not mad at that. No.
Now, do we have those for cannabis businesses? Or
no, probably not. Probably not. It looks like they're federally funded.
Okay. Well, answers that question.
Yeah. So shout out to all the entrepreneurs out there. It's also, yes, it's also National Biodiesel Day.
Collect that used oil, right?
You know, I find it funny that it's National Biodiesel Day. I think diesel is far better than biodiesel, just personally.
Okay, I don't understand why you would say that, but okay.
Because I'm all about drill, baby, drill, and you know what I'm saying, like real oil. You know what I mean? I think all this biodiesel, all this, corn oil and all this stuff is all a total farce. That's my opinion. It's my opinion.
Well, we've got ourselves in our proverbial tits in a ring are in the Middle East right now over oil. So, there's lots of questions about keeping that flowing and how long. Well, how much it's going to cost.
The reality is that America needs oil. Every industrialized nation needs oil, and that is energy. And so there's no way around it, Dale. And people just need to get with the program instead of trying to find new ways and Just what? If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Well, it's a global economy, and without oil, the economy falls on its face. So it's critical.
Exactly.
And you can't remove it because we don't have the other resources to replace it.
There is no other resources to replace it. All the other ones are subpar and not even close to being able to scale, and it's just not a reality. So it's also National Lacy Oatmeal Cookie Day.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
What's a Lacy oatmeal cookie? Come on. Not oatmeal. It's wearing it's
cute. That's cute, Dale. I see exactly where you're going with that. Lacy Oatmeal Cookie Day. Let's see what it says. There are cookie holidays, and then there is National Lacy Oatmeal Cookie Day. Each day, March 18th, this day celebrates a delicate cookie made from oats. Some people refer to this day as National Oatmeal Cookie Day, which is celebrated on April 30th, but the difference between the two is that a Lacy oatmeal cookie are wafer thin and typically accompany a scoop of ice cream or sorbet. Okay. So it's the thinness. It's the thinness. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what the marketing campaign is, right?
Hey,
it's better than the regular oatmeal.
It's. I would say that it's fewer carbs if it's thinner.
Yeah, I'll tell you. All right, well, throwing a scoop of ice cream on there kind of blows the theory of I'm on a diet and watching my meal.
Fair. I think that's fair criticism right there, Dale. I'm not mad at that. Speaking of that, it's also National Awkward Moments Day.
Oh, yeah, we never have those, right?
No, never. Never. National Sloppy Joe Day. Yeah. Do you remember Sloppy Joes? I remember Sloppy Joes in elementary school. They were one of the best lunches that our school had back then.
It was comfort food, yeah, and it went down your face on your shirt.
Oh, you had to have you remember the little napkins and you had to like unfold them. You put those over your shirt, and that was the best time for those. It's also and shout out to everyone. It is also National Supreme Sacrifice Day today. So we do want to honor everyone that has made the ultimate sacrifice for our great country, America.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. We've lost a few this round, and we'll probably lose some more. But once you strap on that uniform and you show up, you put your life in the hands of your superior officers, and just hope to God you make it home.
Yep. And God bless all the families too of the fallen that have given up the supreme sacrifice as well. And on that note, thank you all for joining us and getting high at 9 with us. It's also high noon on the East Coast. And please remember to like, share, and subscribe to us on all social media platforms. You can look up above and down below to see exactly where we live on the internet. And we are live every Monday through Friday on YouTube, Rumble, Twitch, X, Instagram, Facebook, Kick, as well as on our very own website, www.high9news.com. So welcome to everyone joining us for any one of those platforms. And I guess, Dale, it's just me and you doing the two-step today. So here we go. An Ohio marijuana law overhaul is set to take effect, and petition drive aims to repeal changes. Significant changes to Ohio's medical marijuana laws are set to take effect this week under Senate Bill 56 and approved by state lawmakers last year. The legislation has drawn pushback from cannabis advocates who are gathering signatures in an effort to overturn the changes. Governor Mark DeWine pushed for the legislation, citing concerns about intoxicating hemp products. And beginning later this week, Ohio will ban the sale of intoxicating hemp products outside of licensed cannabis dispensaries. Ohioans will only be allowed to possess and use cannabis legally grown or purchased in Ohio. The law also reduces the allowable potency of adult use cannabis, bans public smoking, and imposes new criminal penalties, among other restrictions. In a quote, "For intoxicating hemp, this product has no restrictions on where it can be sold or who can buy it," DeWine said. "Intoxicating hemp has no required regulatory testing at all and is sold in packages enticing to children, many times mimicking the packaging of common candies." The Ohio Cannabis Coalition, which represents Ohio businesses and individuals, supports the legislation, and organizers with Ohioans for Cannabis Choice are gathering signatures to put the law to a referendum. Petitioners need 250,000 valid signatures to place the measure before the voters, and Kevin Spittler, a former Toledo Hemp Center owner and cannabis activist, is among these collecting signatures. He gathered signatures at the Polish Ostrich Bar, and says, "To sit there and say that they know what's best for us is absolutely wrong. We voted for this law, and it's not even about marijuana. It's about Ohio legislators not listening to the people. And if the people voted for it, it should be what is the law," said Spittler. Spittler said he believes cannabis accessibility carries broader benefits beyond adult use, and in an additional quote, "This clipboard I have right here is made of hemp. They're building houses and such, so the plant itself has a huge future. It's just so much more than just a high." Well. Ohio. They're set to do some things in Ohio. I don't understand how they're going to stop people from going out of state to buy cannabis, though. That's the part that kind of confuses me. But maybe they're trying to say that they're going to make it a crime if you get caught with out-of-state cannabis. But I'm confused by this. I'm confused a little bit. Yeah. I don't know how you can outlaw labeling on the packaging in your state and not not outlaw the substance overall. So.
Well, the big problem is that they cannot enforce whatever laws they want to make about cannabis or marijuana or weed, whatever your favorite term is.
Mm-hmm.
They just can't do it. And, I think that hemp, people understand when you smoke hemp, you don't get high. And so trying to parse out some of the differences here, it got screwed up from the gate, and they're trying to fix a mess by making more of a mess. And at some point, if you put it to the voters and they say, we want this, then, what's the problem? Why can't you make this work?
Well, Dale, this is the thing is, I agree with you. They can't enforce a lot of these laws that they are trying to implement. But again, like how would you even regulate this in the first place? Is all of a sudden because you have a Michigan cannabis logo on your package? Or what about all the people that have just trap products that are just have cannabis California logos on the package? You know what I mean? There's plenty of those floating around Ohio too.
Well, I think it's comical you make a state law that says you can't use anything other than Ohio weed.
Yeah.
I mean, it's illegal to import weed from outside the state in. So it's like, okay, well, you went through all these motions for what? It's illegal already to do that.
Yeah.
And some of this just seems like a game. I'm not sure I understand what they're trying to accomplish, because the voters clearly, through their pocketbook, have voted that they want this.
Yep.
Okay. And that's the killer for these legislators, because right now the average voter thinks that legislatures are just full of shit to their eyeballs and can't get anything done. And so here's another example of, you ask them to do something and they come back with a million excuses about why they don't want to do it. In fact, we're going to pass more laws to make it even harder. I don't know how you get through to people other than not voting them back in.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's interesting, and they're getting ready to ban hemp sales and make it so that you can only buy them in a dispensary. Like as if that's going to make them safer. Like,
it's not about safety.
I know.
That's the problem.
I know.
And as I said before, if you go to the grocery store and pick, a half dozen random samples of things they want you to eat, and go have them tested to our standards, it would never pass.
Never in a million years.
It's not about safety.
Yep.
This is just made up. My mama told me it's bad, therefore every argument you've got is bullshit. I won't listen to it.
Yep.
And I'm going on emotions here. And it really is sort of the last vestige for people to realize that the sky's not falling if you make this stuff legal. Age gate it. Let's do some reasonable testing. We don't want chemicals and heavy metals and things like that in it. But for God's sakes, if people go to the Stop and Rob and buy, intoxicating hemp products, that should be telling people something. They don't want all this other nonsense. And they're not afraid to go get high.
Yep.
Because it's not a negative side effect for, this cannabis plant. It brings along with us a high that we think comes from THC, but we can make it from other stuff. And people are not concerned about this. And still to this day, I'd like someone to show me someone who has died from an overdose of cannabis.
Exactly.
Where?
Show us one. Just one. Just show us one. I'm with you, Dale. Well, on that, we're going to roll into our first commercial, and we are going to be right back. It's not clicking, Gabriel. Yeah, there we go.
As bad as Democrats,
The backstabbing rhino Republicans.
President Trump has fought and delivered. But liberal young Kim is a Trump hater. Kim voted to censure President Trump, but voted against censoring Adam Schiff.
I don't work for President Trump. I will oppose him in the strongest terms. I'm not running for the party of Trump.
Republicans proudly stand with President Trump, but not Trump-hating liberal young Kim. Americans for Security is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Oh, yes, and we are back. And Dale, I have an interesting story for you, Dale, because they say congressional researchers give an update on cannabis rescheduling and upcoming hemp THC ban. That's right. Congressional researchers are giving an update on the status of the federal state cannabis law conflict, detailing the limitations of a pending rescheduling action, laying out options for lawmakers to address the issue, and noting changes to hemp policy that are set to take effect later this year. Notably, the new report removes language from an earlier version that had said it is likely federal officials will move cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. And in a focus report from the Congressional Research Service, the CRS, analysts explained how it's increasingly common for states to have laws and policies allowing for medical or adult use cannabis. And that remains in violation of the Federal Controlled Substances Act, the CSA. Federal agencies under the Biden administration recommended moving cannabis from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3 of the CSA following a scientific review, and President Donald J. Trump in December issued an executive order directing Attorney General Pam Bondi to quickly complete that process. But that hasn't materialized yet. If cannabis is reclassified, however, that would not bring the state legal medical cannabis industry into compliance with the CSA without additional legal changes to the CRS said. And while Congress has held hearings and introduced bills proposing a variety of cannabis reforms, it's yet to enact legislation to alter the scheduling status of cannabis. The report serves as an update to an earlier 2024 analysis of federal state marijuana laws in which that the CRS mentioned that rescheduling wouldn't affect the legality of the state legal adult use cannabis industry, and it's unclear why that was amended to reference the medical marijuana industry instead. Instead, the emphasis was added on that part. And also in its 2024 update, CRS said that Congress could take several routes to address the marijuana policy conflict, including by taking no action, in which case it appears likely the DEA will move cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. Now, that's interesting. The latest version still leaves open the possibility that Congress take no action. Well, I imagine that they're not going to take action, so I think that's a fair assessment. But it now avoids commenting on the likelihood that the DEA completes the rescheduling process. Instead, the report says that DOJ may move cannabis from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3 in response to congressional inaction. But both versions state that Congress could also enact cannabis legislation before or after the DEA acts on rescheduling. Well, of course, everyone's known that. It's not rocket science. The updated report, however, includes additional language noting that concerns about the United States compliance with international treaty obligations in regard to cannabis control may remain. Well, I don't think we're really too worried about that, but nonetheless. And other changes in the report include basic statistic updates on the number of states that have enacted legalization and usage rates, with CRS acknowledging that underage marijuana use hit a low of 6% in 2023 and 2024, down from 7.9% in 2011, prior to the implementation of the first adult use cannabis laws. And it further updated a section on hemp laws, explaining how, while the cannabis crop was federally legalized under the 2018 Farm Bill, the definition of hemp is being revised under separate agriculture legislation the president signed last year. Rather than testing for THC content based only on Delta-9 THC concentration, it will now be tested for total THC, a policy change that takes effect in November that industry stakeholders say will effectively eradicate the consumable cannabinoid market. The report also adds new language referencing the enactment of the HALT Fentanyl Act, which contained provisions meant to streamline Schedule 1 controlled substance research, including cannabis research. And overall, though state laws do not affect the status of cannabis under federal law or the ability of the federal government to enforce it, state legalization initiatives have sprouted a number of questions regarding potential implications for federal laws and policies, including federal drug regulation and access to banking and other services for cannabis businesses, the CRS said. Thus far, the federal response to states legalizing cannabis largely has been to allow states to implement their own laws, and DEA has nonetheless reaffirmed that cannabis growth, possession, and trafficking remain crimes under federal law, irrespective of states' cannabis laws. And it also said that federal law enforcement has generally focused its efforts on criminal networks involved in the illicit marijuana trade. Interesting. Congress could also enact cannabis legislation before or after the DOJ acts on rescheduling, and such legislation might take the form of more or less stringent cannabis control, ranging from requiring federal law enforcement to dismantle state medical and adult use cannabis programs to limiting federal cannabis regulation through means such as appropriations provisions to rescheduling or decontrolling cannabis under the CSA. And this last option would largely eliminate the gap with states that have authorized adult use and comprehensive medical use. However, concerns about the United States' compliance with international treaty obligations in regard to cannabis control may remain. As Congress considers these questions, states may continue to act on cannabis legalization. But this report concludes by pointing out that no state has reversed its legalization of either medical or adult use cannabis at this time. Interesting. I think a lot of this was a lot of stuff that we already knew, and so I don't think a lot of it is new information, but I'm really glad that they put this into this fancy report, Dale, and used a lot of taxpayer dollars to do so. What do you have to say about this?
Well, from our side of the fence, some of this stuff seems like, a no shit Sherlock type of position to take. But as we also know, inside the beltwaves of the DEA and the drug control mechanisms in the federal government, there's still powerful people who don't seem to want this to change, and they can't figure out how they want it to change. And I don't even know what to say to that, because there's more than enough research at this point to demonstrate that there's no way this is a Schedule I drug. It will never hold up to any kind of scrutiny under the rules of Schedule I. But nobody really wants to put that in front of a court, because that pulls the rug out from underneath them.
Yeah.
Okay. But inside the DEA, there are people who just, want to maintain the ability to control this. But I'll say this again, there is no way the federal government, with its entire law enforcement services put on this task, and stop people from growing, moving it around, selling it, smoking it. They just can't do it. So you ask yourself at some point, why do you continue to beat your head against a wall when you know your head is softer than the wall? What do we keep doing here? It seems pretty obvious to me. And if we take, I'm beating the drum of let's follow alcohol.
Yeah.
We want to call this a vice. Let's pick one of those words. Oh, we don't like it, but we can't stop it, so let's try to control it. Okay. If it's a vice, then there are ways that we can put age gating on it. We can put it into the medical care system, so we recognize and try to treat people for this like we do with alcohol. Okay. And if somebody wants to put THC into cough syrup or, grandma's sleep medicine, whatever, then you can do that and authorize either natural or synthetic cannabinoids that will do that, because they put plenty of alcohol in pharmaceuticals.
Yep.
I've gotten pharmaceutical alcohol, and I'll tell you what, be careful drinking that shit, because it'll put you out real quick. But from my standpoint, it doesn't seem that difficult. Okay. But I've been on the inside looking out for a long time. And even if you go outside and look at this, it's a slow process. Today we think that alcohol got fixed really quickly. It didn't. It took, over a decade for them to realize that this ain't working. Okay. And then in California, it took 20 additional years before we finally got a constitutional amendment, which, takes away local control and taxation and crap like that, makes it a statewide thing. So, as much as I'd like this to be here today with alacrity, if you look even at alcohol, it took decades to figure that one out. And And I mean, it's been decades now. I mean, it's 56 years since they passed the Controlled Substances Act. And right out of the gate, Governor Raymond Schafer told Nixon that, why are you wasting your time on weed?
Yeah.
You know, leave people alone. This is not a problem. And that didn't resonate. And people are saying the same thing today. And there's still these people inside that it doesn't resonate with. And, you know, we're on the outside looking in right here, Jason, and watching a clown show.
Definitely.
And it's really hard to watch because we know that we've seen our friends and my clients try to do this, and they just keep making it virtually impossible. So you go to the trap. Yeah, that's the reality here. And the federal government even recognizes they don't spend money trying to go after people who are following state law.
Yeah.
Well, can we go even further than that? And let's sit down and try to figure this out. Unfortunately, the polarization in politics right now, this one cuts across both Democrats and Republicans and independents pretty well. But trying to get anything through Congress right now is just, it's almost impossible.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I feel you. Yeah, I'm not expecting Congress to act in any way. I am expecting the DOJ to execute this this action, but I have a feeling that it's going to be stalled a little while, especially because of I don't know if you saw what Nancy Mace just recently did. Oh man, Dale, she's censuring Pam Bondi in regards for you know, not being as transparent, I would say, with the Epstein files release. So we're gonna keep on watching this. So that's gonna slow that down. And as I said, I don't see the rescheduling getting actually happening from the DOJ standpoint until October for the midterms. I just don't see it's going to be an October surprise.
To get anything done, you have to draw a line in the sand. Okay, and that's what they did until they delayed the changing of the hemp laws until October. Okay, give them some time, and you put a line in the sand. They have to do something. Okay, but we've got, the airports now, they're not paying TSA workers because of, you know, they're having pissing matches about things. These poor bastards are going to work with no money. And, you know, that's a mess for them. But from 30,000 feet, I just see the polarization here. People, it's like the cat and the laser light. They're running off on different tangents. It's like, you know, can you come back here and focus? And how about you think about us, the average American voter, and do something for us? And I think the vitriol is pretty heavy right now. And it shouldn't have any effect on this, but we all know it does.
Yep.
Because you got to get a bipartisan group together to do this. And right now, this is the blender's turned on, and people do not want to, you know, hold hands.
Yes. And
that Epstein thing is just not going to go away.
Oh no, it's definitely not. That's for sure. That's for sure, without a doubt. It's definitely not going anywhere. That is for sure. But on that, we are gonna go right into attorney at law, Mr. Dale Schafer. Dale has been an attorney since the Reagan administration. He has represented physicians, hospitals, insurance companies, cops, corrections officers, and for the last 25 years, he has specialized in cannabis law. He served a 5-year federal prison sentence for helping medical marijuana patients and managed to save his law license. He's blunt. He doesn't smoke them because they're ratchet, they're nasty, and they turn your teeth yellow and other things yellow, but he is honest, and he's unconcerned with your opinion, public opinions, and anyone else's opinion that wants to identify in any way. And he will show you how he can defy gravity with his cape on by pissing up a rope. It is none other than your favorite Tio Loco, and you can find him at his own law office at the law office of none other than Dale Schafer.
Hi, good morning, everybody, and for those on the East Coast, good afternoon. It's Tio Loco, Jason's favorite, full of shit kids here. You know, trying to just call balls and strikes as best I can. My article today came out of Marijuana Moment. It was from the 16th. Kyle Yeager wrote it. And the headline is, using marijuana is more morally acceptable than gambling and abortion, Americans say in a new poll. Okay, well, from the standpoint of my legal mind, it's like you used a term here, morally acceptable. And what's the definition of that? Because that can get all over the place. And from, a stand back and look at this, there were over 27,000 people who participated in the Pew Research study. So it isn't like it was just, 100 phone calls. How do you think about this? There was a lot of effort. And this is worldwide. Okay. And they do not define moral in there. And that's one of those ambiguous terms that everybody says, yeah, I know what moral is. You go, okay, well, then let's be clear. Explain to me what it means. And that's where things begin to get off the rails. So I have had discussions, starting in law school and all the way through my career about the basis for why people think things are good or think they're bad. And it tends to involve what we call moral principles. And everybody has different ideas about this. But I went looking last night, see if I could make sense out of, what does it mean, a moral foundation for your decisions. And Jonathan Haidt, I don't know if you know who he is, Jason, but he has written a lot about this, and especially about, where, young men find themselves today. But he wrote about a moral foundation. And some of the things that came out of the Pew study and what I found from these moral foundation arguments are very interesting, considering that the treatment of drugs in the United States has followed a religiously moral line since the end of the 1800s. Okay, so Haidt's idea about morality starts with, is it harmful for someone to do? And can people care for themselves? Is it fair? What people, the laws, are they fair? The moral accounting, is it something fair to people? And then does it give people liberty? Does it allow them to do what they want to do? There's loyalty to the group. Okay, we're a tribal people. Patriotism, things like that. There's the authority thing and respect for authority, law and order. We make rules, we expect you to follow them. And then there's the purity and the sanctity argument, and that really is a biblical thing. Okay. Now, in law school, what we were taught is that our American legal tradition comes from English common law.
Yep, that's true.
From the Magna Carta. And there were early English common law felonies. They were all capital offenses. They involved, stealing, cheating, using violence, things like that. What we today call more malum in se crimes. And then an interesting thing that I found fascinating to me was the waves of people that came from England to the United States. The people in New England were Puritans, and they really thought they had everything figured out. They didn't tolerate anybody, didn't follow their way of seeing the world, where other groups that came to the United States, they were less than that. They want the government out of their business. Don't tell us what to do. So we see a lot of this going into the way that the United States has made its laws. Now, what this Pew survey showed is that from the moral standpoint, marijuana is more morally acceptable than gambling, pornography, abortion, and even being gay. Okay. Now, a global survey, they focus on some things for the United States, and they thought in the United States that marijuana or pot is 70% think it's morally acceptable and 23% say it's not morally acceptable. Okay,
wow.
So the vast majority look at this and go, whatever your idea of morality is, this doesn't tick it for most people. Okay? And in the United States, people think that birth control is 91% morally acceptable, alcohol 84%. Okay? So, marijuana and cannabis is at 76%, but it's still pretty high up there. People are not saying, oh, you're morally depraved if you use cannabis. We're not saying that. But things begin to get very interesting as you go into the political stances of people. And it turns out that the more highly educated you are, there's a slight uptick in whether you think marijuana is morally acceptable or not compared to lower education. But it's only 79% to 74%, not very much. Okay. In other countries, it's really, really different. If you are highly educated, say in Mexico, and only 37% think it's wrong, but the less educated 70% think it's wrong. Okay, so around the world, it's hard to know what people really focus on. But the more education you have, and here's an interesting one, Jason, that if you're progressive or liberal, they tend to look in the moral area of the harm caused, the fairness, and the liberty or oppression angle here. Okay, which is not surprising because progressive think, oh, it's always got to be fair, it's got to be, there's an oppressor out there and stuff like that. But conservatives, they take a look at all of the categories because they recognize that does it cause harm? Is it fair to people? And then, does it affect your liberty? But they also ask about, we as a group, we gave up some of our liberties. Are you guys being responsible to our group? Okay. And the authority, people that are conservative look more at, we have rules. We want you to respect our rules. And also this sanctimonious thing, okay, which is, a biblical part. Let's just say that the Judeo-Christian ethic has some biblical no-nos in there. Okay, so the conservatives look at all of these, and the progressives only pick the couple that are about fairness and does it hurt anybody and about liberty. So I don't know that helps really to understand why we can't get this thing through Congress or to get both parties to recognize that, cannabis should not be treated like fentanyl, okay, or heroin. But I would hope someone would look a little more into this because myself, I recognize that, I've got social equity clients. I take a look at what's happened in the past, but I also look at more factors than just, is it hurting somebody? Is it fair? Or is there an oppressor out there? So I guess that makes me a conservative. I don't.
You are.
If you take a look at
I always say you're a conservative, Dale. So you know what I mean. I always say that.
It's no secret. I was the only man in my family who wasn't a Republican, and it was Richard Nixon who did that to me. So I was raised to think you got to pay the bills. You respect people for who they are, and you treat people accordingly. If you're an asshole, that's what you'd expect to get from me. And you know what? We can't keep spending like drunken sailors on an open credit card. At some point, you got to say, no, we can't afford it. And if that makes me conservative, great. I stand by it because I've run businesses and I have run families, and you got to pay the bills. And right now, we are not paying attention to paying the bills. Okay?
Dale,
crazy.
I am totally classifying you and classifying you as a conservative girl dad, just so you know.
Well, I am that. 50 years now I've been a girl dad. And,
I'm saying.
Well, but honestly, my primary love language is quality time, which is a very feminine thing. I like to sit down and talk to people honestly about stuff. But my sons will tell you that when I said no, the next thing is you're going to hear the belt leaving the loops. Okay. And so I'm a trad dad too. See, I don't know what to tell you.
You're a conservative, Dale. You're a There's no way around it. You're a conservative. You just have to have your come to Jesus moment. You know what I mean? Hopefully soon you'll re-register under the proper party, and you know what I mean. We'll be off to the races. Yeah.
Well, there's this guy named Donald Trump that is still concerning to me. Oh, you love him and all that stuff. He's concerning to me.
He's the greatest president America has ever had in our lifetime.
Yeah. Well. The jury's out on that.
Yes, jury can be out all they want. You know what I mean? Make them a sandwich, Dale. That's all I got to say. You know what I mean? While we're out to lunch, make a sandwich. Don't forget about that part. But I do find it interesting, really not surprising, really either. The amount of public support of the public thinking that all of these other things are far worse than cannabis. That to me is not very surprising. It's nice to actually have some data and some raw numbers to to back it up, because a lot of times when you talk with ideological legislators, they don't necessarily always believe that same sentiment, which just shows that they're a little bit out of touch with not just their constituents but the American people overall. And I would encourage anyone to show me, any evangelical, or you don't even have to be an evangelical to show me this, but show me some verse in the Bible that says that cannabis is bad. And when I was a kid, that a lot of the religious would say, oh, well, you're supposed to adhere to the laws of the land. Okay, adhere to the laws of the land. I can accept that argument. Okay, but at the same time, you have Genesis 1:21-9 that says that God created all the plants and everything seed-bearing plant is to be utilized and yada yada yada. And so that contradicts that, because how can you outlaw something that God created? I don't understand how you can stand on the same foot as that from an ideological basis.
Well, it gets rather complicated, because the issue really came to a head when we had the Spanish-American War, and the United States got the Philippines, which was a Catholic country, and they had reached an accommodation with the opium users in the country. We'll leave you alone. Don't take it out of your communities, blah, blah, blah. And when we took over the country, we had the Puritans. You call them evangelicals today. They were the New England Puritans that were pushing to make alcohol illegal, and heroin and morphine had shown up in Western civilization. They were like, holy shit, what do we do? Yeah, well, you tried to kill China with this stuff, and now it's in our backyard. What do we do? So they developed these moral arguments against drugs, which they can't back up in the Bible. But then you look at, well, it causes harm to society. I mean, there's rationales where you might want to consider some laws about some of this stuff. But the moral foundation for it, the strictly biblical foundation for it, or the Quran or the Torah, wherever you want to look for it, is not there. They manufactured out of thin air.
Exactly.
And it just got worse as we went forward, and we ended up in 37. They actually made marijuana illegal for reasons that they pulled right out of their ass. And a lot of them were industrial, because they were inventing these petrochemicals and plastics and things. So we've got a history here that you can't support rationally or logically, but it doesn't change people who have deep-seated emotional truths. And that's where religion is, okay?
Yeah.
And I'm all for everybody having religious freedom. You have your own ontology. I don't, if you're comfortable with it, I'm comfortable with it too. But when you take it outside of your own mind or your own group you're in and try to impose it on other people, now they ask questions to get uncomfortable.
Yep.
And as you point out, show me biblically where it says you can't smoke pot. They can't find it.
They can't. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist.
It doesn't. But the same argument holds for heroin, okay, or opium, basically. And it gets muddled because some of this is harmful to society. So we can make up rules that we call malum prohibitum. We're telling you not to do it because we think it's harmful to society, but they can't even back that one up because there's no evidence that cannabis is harmful to society. So we've got to leave some of the hairs on fire from fentanyl, which you can see and actually believe, to the stories about weed.
Yep.
It's, there's the highways aren't blood red. The sky didn't fall. Even though some kids get all their parents' gummy, I worked at an ER. We'd put them in a bed and let them sleep it off.
Yeah.
And we knew it wasn't going to hurt them.
Yep.
Scares mom and dad. But then it's like, keep your goddamn gummies locked up, you idiot.
Yep, exactly. And on that, we're going to roll into our next commercial, and we are going to be right back.
Rescheduling cannabis, which was classified as more dangerous than fentanyl. Trump's action will destroy the cartel's illicit black market, expand medical research, and ensure seniors and veterans safely receive the care they need. Thank President Trump for delivering on another America First promise.
Oh, yes, and we're back. Stop whatever you're doing. Make sure you smash that like button. I know we'll appreciate it. You'll appreciate it, and YouTube will appreciate it. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already. And all of the articles that we cover on today's show, you can read directly on our website at www.high9news.com. And please make sure that you are following us on X and Rumble, as those are the two most stable platforms on the metaverse.
Under President Trump, America is back. Trump's delivered the largest tax cut in history, putting more money in our pockets and restored America's economic dominance. Promises made, promises kept. Now it's time to fulfill another promise from President Trump and reschedule cannabis, which supports over 400,000 jobs and creates billions of dollars in economic growth. Reschedule cannabis and stack another win, Mr. President. America First Agriculture Action Inc. is responsible for the contents of this advertising.
Yes, and we are back. And, Dale, we're going to roll out to the East Coast for a minute because the retail market for adult use cannabis passes the Virginia General Assembly, Dale. That's right. Virginia lawmakers passed legislation to let people 21 and over buy cannabis for adult use purposes starting January 1st of 2027, moving the state closer to ending its year-long stay in cannabis purgatory. If it is signed into law by Governor Abigail Spanberger, I anticipate that she will, and she is expected, the legislation would mark the end of a 6-year wait for people who have been allowed to carry small amounts of cannabis without any way to buy it for adult use purposes. In 2021, a Democrat-led General Assembly passed legislation that let people 21 and over possess small amounts of cannabis and have up to 4 cannabis plants in their homes starting in July of that year. The initial plan at the time was for cannabis possession and adult use sales to both start in 2024, but Democratic then Governor Ralph Northam called for possession to be decriminalized sooner. After the House of Delegates and the state Senate passed their own versions of the cannabis market bill, a group of 8 legislators began closed-door negotiations to iron out differences and come up with a final compromise. On the last day of the 2026 legislative session, the House passed the conference bill 64-32 in a mostly party-line vote, and the Senate voted 21-18 late Friday night to pass the bill. State Senator Lucretia Aird, a Democrat from Henrico, who carried the Senate bill, called the legislation a balanced path to open Virginia's retail cannabis market, and she said the deal was the product of months of collaboration and negotiation among lawmakers, regulators, industry representatives, advocates, and other stakeholders. In a quote, "Many parties did not get everything they asked for, but everyone got what they needed to legally and safely operate a marketplace," Aird said on the Senate floor before Friday's vote. "This is the hallmark of a good compromise." The start date for the legal retail market was one of the sticking points with the bill proposed by Paul Krinzik, a Democrat from Fairfax, and opening sales on November 1st of 2026, and the Senate's bill from Aird calling for 2027. In the end, the Senate start date prevailed, but the tax structure the House wanted ended up making the final proposal. The compromise establishes a 6% state cannabis tax and would allow localities to adopt an additional 1 to 3.5% local tax. Combined with excise tax, the total tax would typically be around 12 to 16%, Aird said. Existing medical cannabis operators in Virginia would have to pay $10 million to get into the retail marketplace, a compromise between the $5 million proposed in the House and $15 million proposed in the Senate. Wow! The final proposal maintains language that was in both bills, including capping the number of retail cannabis establishment licenses at 350 and increasing the possession limit from 1 ounce to 2.5 ounces, and localities can opt out of adult use sales. Under the final proposal, Virginia's Alcoholic Beverage Control Authority and the state's Cannabis Control Authority need to submit a plan on how they plan to oversee and enforce rules for the retail cannabis marketplace. The legislation strips out cannabis-related penalties currently in the state code, but adds new misdemeanor and felony offenses for illegal cannabis cultivation and sales. In one example, selling or distributing marijuana without a license would be a Class 2 misdemeanor for the first offense and Class 1 misdemeanor for the second, and then a Class 6 felony for subsequent offenses. And last year, Krizek said that Virginia is projected to bring in more than $400 million in annual tax revenue over the first 5 years of legal adult use cannabis sales. I wonder if that $400 million, if they're equating, if they're calling that for these $10 million license fees that they're anticipating. The bill directs 40% of the state's cannabis tax revenues toward early childhood care and education, and 30% to the Cannabis Equity Reinvestment Fund, which supports people historically disproportionately targeted and affected by drug enforcement, and awards grants to businesses. I wonder if they're going to have a $5 million grant for people to get. Under the final bill, a retail marijuana store can't be located within 1,000 feet of a school or a daycare center, and the oversight of industrial intoxicating hemp, which has been regulated by the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, will transfer to the CCA, according to the legislation. And the final compromise also removes provisions limiting cannabis micro businesses from selling and buying among themselves, and updates testing and labeling rules for products. The final proposal now heads to Governor Spanberger's desk, who can sign it into law, propose changes, or veto the measure. Unlike her predecessor, Republican Glenn Youngkin, Spanberger has said she backs opening a legal retail cannabis market in Virginia. Wow. It's great that they want to open a market, but who's going to have $10 million for a license, Dale? I mean, come on, bro. Like, this is ridiculous. Oh, man, what do you...
Well, it's like they've learned nothing. And I don't know how many times you have to tell people that the more expensive you make it to get in the legal market, the more the trap just, is going to bring in more weed.
I will give them some credit. This 13 to 16% tax is a lot more reasonable than what I've seen executed in a lot of other states, because not to mention that is also a combination of all the taxes proposed, you know what I'm saying? And so it's not, a 16% excise tax on top of a local sales tax on top of another tax, and So I will say that they are fairly measured in that. I would like to see it lower, but that is a much more measured approach than I've seen come out of a lot of other states. But this I don't know if we call it an application fee, and if they charge that much to get the license, how much are they going to charge for renewals, Dale?
Well, those are some of my concerns.
Yeah,
especially here in California, is that it's expensive to get the license, and every year you've got to pony up tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. And if you got to throw millions, I mean, I've actually, built some of these, and when you start budgeting, and you start off with $10 million just for the application fees, like, what?
Yeah.
Who's going to be loaning you that kind of money? You have to look at the predatory people that are going to come in to get that kind of money in your hands just from the jump.
That's a lot of eighths you got to sell just to make $1 million, let alone, $5 to $10 million. And then you still have all of the costs that are associated with getting to be able to sell that much in the first place. That's a lot of money.
Additional millions.
Yeah.
And if this is a license, is it for each location, or is it for a state license and you get sub-licenses? Even that begins to be problematic, because you run budgets. I've got X amount to build out, X amount for CEQA and all other shit.
Virginia?
Where's this coming from?
Virginia is not as big as Florida, first of all, Dale. Okay, so let's just put that in a little bit of a more perspective. You know what I mean? And so the population definitely isn't as big as Florida, and I'm not sure that enough people are going to buy into the fact of this whole program in the first place. If I was a medical operator, I'm going to try to just focus on keeping people medical, and like that. So I'd start I'd put $1 million into a whole marketing campaign of why, public relations marketing campaign of why it's better to remain a patient than to support an adult use dispensary. And you're probably going to get a whole lot more for bang for your buck than you would with that whole marketing campaign than you would with paying $5-10 million to the state for an adult use license.
Well, it's the same mentality that we face everywhere. We are looked upon as a cash cow. You're just criminals. We're going to take everything we can from you.
Yep.
And then you can do this. You can make money.
Yep.
Well, no, we can't, because we compete with the trap, which has none of these entry fees, no taxes, none of that stuff. And people are not afraid to buy from the trap. So until you give the green market a green light to go everywhere and keep these entry fees and the taxes low to start with, so you can actually get up and run, then this is brain dead.
Yeah,
it really is.
I'm with you, Dale. I'm with you. Good luck, Virginia. Good luck, Virginia. You know what I'm saying?
$10 million. How can we make this industry fail?
Yeah.
Well, let's give them a $2 million permit fee.
Yeah. Yeah. That'll keep all the undesirables out. That'll do it. Yeah. It's winter. Well, on that, we're going to roll into our final commercial, and we're going to be right back.
As bad as Democrats,
The backstabbing rhino Republicans.
President Trump has fought and delivered, but liberal young Kim is a Trump hater. Kim voted to censure President Trump, but voted against censoring Adam Schiff.
I don't work for President Trump. I will oppose him in the strongest terms. I'm not running for the party of Trump.
Republicans proudly stand with President Trump, but not Trump-hating liberal young Kim. Americans for Security is responsible for the content of this advertising.
We gotta click the right button there, Gabe. There we go. All right, and Dale, I have two final stories for you today, buddy. The New York Senate committee approves a bill to recognize out-of-state medical cannabis patients and allow pre-rolls. Look at that reciprocity coming to New York. A New York Senate committee has approved a bill that would allow out-of-state patients to take part in the state's medical cannabis program, while also directing regulators to approve pre-roll products in the medical marijuana program. Senate Bill 3105 was approved today by the Senate Health Committee in an 11-3 vote. The measure was filed in January by state senators Jeremy Cooney, a Democrat, and James Schafer, a Democrat as well. According to the bill's text, a person who is not a resident of the state but who is authorized to engage in the medical use of cannabis under the laws of such person's state or jurisdiction or residence is deemed to hold a valid registry identification if the person provides legitimate documentation and abides by the legal limits on the possession, delivery, and production of cannabis for medical purposes in this state, as set forth in Section 31 of this article. That sounds fair. The proposal specifies that states' cannabis control board shall make regulations to implement the provisions of this subdivision and may enter into reciprocatory agreements with other states with medical cannabis programs. And in addition, the board shall promulgate regulations for the approval of pre-roll products in the medical cannabis program. And although adult use cannabis is legal, New York medical marijuana patients are allowed higher possession limits, and products can contain larger amounts of THC, and products come in formulations not available in adult use stores. In addition, the tax on medical cannabis is far lower than the tax on adult use cannabis. And in June of 2025, the measure was given approval by the full Senate by a vote of 43-16, and however, it ultimately died in the Assembly before the legislative session ended, forcing supporters to again put it through the Senate committee process. Well, I think this might be the first piece of sensible legislation I've seen come out of New York in a long time. I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this, Dale. But the pre-roll thing with the medical market, I mean, that only makes sense. And ultimately, I think the people that are going to probably spend the most money using the reciprocal program are going to be residents of Florida. But what do you have to say about this, Dale?
Well, it makes sense from a tourism standpoint.
Yeah.
Basically invite people in. You can come here, and you use cannabis for medical purposes, come here and get it. I think every state should have it. Mm-hmm. So if it's allowed and you're medical from some other state, you should be able to go there and be able to identify yourself and get your whatever you prefer from the medical programs. And I can't for the life of me understand why you wouldn't allow pre-rolls.
Well,
I mean,
so this is
why don't you allow pre-roll?
Well, so this was in their medical program, and if you remember New York's medical program when it first came out, they didn't even allow for flower. It was only tinctures and formulated products. And so this is a natural evolution. I feel that only makes sense for them. I mean, after all, I could go to a bodega and just buy a pre-roll. So why shouldn't I be able to go into a medical store and buy a pre-roll too? It just doesn't make sense.
Well, but none of this really makes sense when you take a look at what's really going on the ground with people wanting to get cannabis and where they get it and how easy it is to get it, because the trap is everywhere. I mean, like you say, go to a bodega. Are the cops really busting bodegas selling pre-rolls?
No.
No. Like, no. It's like back during Prohibition in New York City. It's like I ain't got time for this shit. There's real criminals. Someone's robbing a bank over there, or someone's beating some guy up, and you want me to bust somebody for selling the pre-roll for things they want?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't make any sense. But yet here we are, and we continue to talk about baby steps, incremental steps, which from my position at 30,000 feet, it's like, this is stupid. You need to get way ahead of this and just get out of the way. But you take whatever you can get, I guess, and try to put some kind of a spin on it.
I think this is a good move. Finally, good job, New York. You're doing something right. You know, I don't think it's going to make that big of a dent in anything, but it is a step in the right direction. I will give you guys that.
Yeah.
And I have one final story for you, Dale. Are you ready? Canada. You're going to find this very interesting, Dale. Because a Canadian court overturns Health Canada's marijuana security clearance denial tied to a Facebook friendship, Dale. Did you get exactly? I'm going to read it again for you, Dale. Canadian court overturns Health Canada marijuana security clearance denial tied to a Facebook friendship, Dale. All right, it's a lot to follow along. A federal court in Canada has overturned Health Canada's denial of a marijuana industry security clearance, finding the agency unreasonably relied on a Facebook friendship to conclude the applicant posed a public safety risk. Interesting. The case involved an applicant affiliated with Pure Botanicals Limited, who was seeking a security clearance to serve as an alternate quality assurance person at a licensed producer. Health Canada denied the application in December of 2024, even though cannabis-related law enforcement issues, even though cannabis-related law enforcement issues from 2013 and 2014 had already been addressed and accepted by the agency as alleviated. Instead, the refusal was based on what Health Canada described as an association with a person linked to organized crime. According to the record, the evidence for that association was that the applicant and her common law spouse were Facebook friends with the individual. Health Canada's Controlled Substances and Cannabis branch had sought additional RCMP information in spring of 2024, including a May 9th request asking that any organized crime links be included in the notes. The agency received 2 special law enforcement record check reports dated April 25th and June 10th of 2024. And under subsection 53.1 of the cannabis regulations, the executive director concluded the applicant posed an unacceptable risk to public health or public safety, including the possibility of marijuana being diverted to the illicit market or activity. Screenshots showing the Facebook connections were included in the record, and the federal court found that reasoning unreasonable, saying the decision lacks sufficient justification, transparency, and intelligibility. And the court said Health Canada failed to explain how a Facebook friendship on its own could support such a serious conclusion. The ruling noted that Canadian legal precedent has treated Facebook friend status as weak and equivocal evidence of a real-world friendship, and the court also said Health Canada did not examine whether there were any actual personal, financial, or business ties between the applicant and the third party, or explain how the connection could create a real risk of correlation or inducement. Judge Michael D. Manson also criticized the agency for shifting the burden onto the applicant, and in a quote, the executive director's statement that the applicant did not concretely explain the connection and demonstrate that there is no risk shifts focus away from the decision maker's obligation to ground the refusal in reasonable ground supported by the record, Manson wrote. The court granted the judicial review, set aside the original refusal, and sent the matter back to Health Canada for redetermination. The applicant was also awarded costs in the legal decision, Dale. Look at that. Wow.
My God.
Yeah.
The courts actually asked some questions like, hey, prove it.
Yeah.
Prove it.
Be careful who your Facebook friends are, Dale, apparently.
But see, that's the nonsense. Guilt by association just is not an acceptable reason to deny somebody something. I mean, as an attorney, we have multiple levels of proof you have substantial evidence, preponderance, clear and convincing, and then beyond a reasonable doubt. And it looks like they didn't use any of them.
They didn't. No.
Well,
No.
it was like when the gun case was up, and they were asking these guys, okay, so just because you drink means you're dangerous and lose your guns.
Yep.
Prove it.
Yep.
Because all of our founding fathers drank a lot.
Yep.
And they weren't dangerous. And now because you're a Facebook friend, you're now dangerous. No, you got to prove something here. Because how many of us have accepted some, friend request and find out, oh, you're a piece of shit, and you get rid of them?
Exactly.
But in that period of time, I didn't know these. I wasn't like at a bar trying to pick them up or anything like that.
Yeah.
That's not how Facebook works.
Exactly.
Come on.
Exactly. And, at the same time, too, there's sometimes, too, when you get friend requests and you're not sure who the person is, and you just accidentally hit the confirm button you didn't necessarily mean to. But, hey, and then you got to go, and you don't even know the person. You got to go and try to find that person in your friend list. And if you can't remember the name, how are you going to be able to find them to kick them out? It's just it's a very weak way to do national security, in my opinion.
Well, I've never looked up somebody with a friend request and have them say, I'm part of the Bonanno crime family.
Yeah.
Get in touch with me. I'll help you, do whatever you need. It's like, I've never seen. Come on.
It's crazy, Dale. Yeah. I knew you would find the story amusing. I knew you would find it amusing. Glad we could get a little kick out of you, buddy.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, on that, thank you all for joining us and getting high at 9 with us every Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific and high noon on the East Coast. And big shout out to our audience and supporters for tuning in daily and listening to the insanity that is the developing cannabis industry. Huge thank you to Catalyst Cannabis for helping us keep the lights on, and thank you to our correspondents for being absolutely amazing. And thank you to Cannabis Sativa L for giving us a reason to do this every day. Thank you to Cloud Media Partners Elias and Gabriel. They're somewhere in the metaverse. And thank you all for tuning in and getting high at 9 with us. We are America's #1 daily cannabis news show.